My ex-wife had an affair with my best friend and convinced our daughters I cheated on her for 5 years. Then my oldest found her affair texts and exposed the truth to everyone at her college graduation party. I never imagined I would spend 5 years being hated by my own children because of lies my ex-wife told them. My name is Ryan, and I'm 43 years old. I have 2 daughters, Emma who just turned 23, and Sophie who is 20. For 5 years, they refused to speak to me, blocked my number, and returned every letter I sent unopened. They believed I was the villain in my divorce from their mother, that I had abandoned them for another woman. The truth was so much darker than they knew. My ex-wife Catherine and I were married for 18 years. We met in our early 20s through work and built what I thought was a solid life together. I worked as an accountant at a regional firm, eventually becoming a partner. Catherine worked part-time as a real estate agent, which gave her flexibility with the kids' schedules. We lived in a comfortable suburban house and were active in our community. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought we were happy enough. We had the usual arguments about finances, parenting decisions, and household responsibilities. Catherine could be controlling and critical, but I told myself that was just her personality. She liked things done a certain way and got frustrated when I didn't meet her standards. About 7 years ago, when Emma was 16 and Sophie was 13, Catherine became close friends with a woman named Melissa who had recently moved into our neighborhood. Melissa was going through a divorce and Catherine took her under her wing, inviting her to neighborhood events and including her in our social circle. I was glad Catherine had found a good friend, especially since she had complained about feeling isolated as a stay-at-home mom for years. Melissa and Catherine started spending a lot of time together. They would go shopping, have lunch dates, attend yoga classes, and have wine nights at our house. Melissa became a fixture in our lives, often joining us for family dinners and weekend activities. She seemed nice enough, though I always felt she was a bit invasive, asking very personal questions about our marriage and finances. Around this same time, my best friend from college, Jason, moved back to our city after working abroad for several years. Jason and I had been close friends since freshman year, and I was excited to have him nearby again. He was single, successful in finance, and looking to settle down. I introduced him to our social circle, including Melissa, thinking they might hit it off since they were both newly single. Jason and Melissa did connect, and they started dating within a few weeks of meeting. It seemed perfect, my best friend and my wife's best friend becoming a couple. We started doing more things as a foursome, going to concerts, taking weekend trips, and hosting dinner parties together. Catherine seemed thrilled with this arrangement, constantly suggesting we should all spend more time together. Looking back, I can see signs I missed. Catherine started dressing differently, wearing more makeup even for casual outings with Melissa. She became very concerned with her appearance and started working out more intensely. She also became more critical of me, pointing out my flaws and comparing me unfavorably to Jason. She would make comments about how successful Jason was, how well he dressed, how charming he was with people. I also noticed that Catherine and Jason seemed to have a lot of private jokes and conversations. They would exchange glances during group dinners that felt exclusionary. When I mentioned it to Catherine, she said I was being paranoid and that Jason was just naturally charismatic. She claimed I was jealous of Jason's success and taking it out on their innocent friendship. About 6 years ago, things started falling apart. Catherine began staying out later when she was supposedly with Melissa. She would come home at midnight or 1 in the morning, claiming they had lost track of time talking or had gone to a late movie. Her phone was suddenly password protected, and she became defensive when I asked about it. She said I was being controlling and that she deserved privacy. The arguments escalated. Catherine accused me of being boring, unambitious, and emotionally distant. She said I had let myself go physically and wasn't the man she had married. She complained that I was too focused on work and didn't pay enough attention to her needs. Every conversation turned into a criticism of my failings as a husband. I tried to suggest marriage counseling, but Catherine refused. She said the problems in our marriage were my fault and that counseling would just be a waste of money. She claimed she had already spent years trying to fix our relationship and was exhausted from carrying the emotional burden alone. Then one evening, I came home early from work with flowers, hoping to surprise Catherine and maybe start repairing things between us. I walked into our house and heard voices upstairs in our bedroom. My stomach dropped as I recognized Jason's voice along with Catherine's. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, frozen, listening to sounds that made it clear what was happening. I don't remember walking up those stairs. I just remember pushing open our bedroom door and seeing my wife and my best friend together in the bed I had shared with Catherine for 18 years. The shock on their faces would have been comical in any other situation. Jason scrambled to grab his clothes while Catherine pulled the sheet around herself. I didn't yell or make a scene. I felt eerily calm as I told them both to get dressed and get out of my house. Jason tried to apologize, saying it wasn't what it looked like, which was perhaps the stupidest thing he could have said. Catherine just stared at me with what looked like defiance rather than shame. After they left, I sat in my living room trying to process what I had seen. I called my brother Michael, who lived an hour away. He came immediately and stayed with me that night. The next morning, I contacted a divorce attorney. Michael advised me to document everything and prepare for Catherine to fight dirty. Catherine came back the next day while the girls were at school. She didn't apologize or try to explain. Instead, she went on the offensive. She said she had been unhappy for years and that I had driven her into Jason's arms through my neglect and emotional unavailability. She claimed the affair had been going on for only a few weeks and that it was my fault for not being a better husband. I asked her about Melissa. Catherine's face showed a flash of something, guilt maybe, or calculation. She said Melissa knew about the affair and had been supportive. In fact, Catherine claimed that Melissa and Jason had never actually been dating seriously. The whole relationship had been a cover so Catherine and Jason could spend time together without raising suspicion. Melissa had been in on it from the beginning, helping them maintain the lie. The betrayal was so complete it took my breath away. My wife had been having an affair with my best friend for over a year, using her supposed friendship with Melissa as cover, while Melissa pretended to date Jason. The four of us had spent countless hours together with me completely oblivious to the elaborate deception they had constructed. I told Catherine the first wanted a divorce and that she needed to find somewhere else to stay. She refused to leave, saying the house was as much hers as mine and that I couldn't force her out. She also said we needed to think about how this would affect Emma and Sophie, and that we should present a united front to them. That's when Catherine revealed her strategy. She said that if I pushed for divorce and tried to paint her as the villain, she would tell the girls that I was the one who had cheated, that I was abandoning the family for another woman. She said teenage girls always side with their mothers, and that Emma and Sophie would believe whatever story she told them. I was stunned by her willingness to weaponize our daughters. I told her I would not lie to Emma and Sophie, that they deserved to know the truth about why their parents were divorcing. Catherine laughed and said the truth was whatever she decided to tell them first, and that my version of events would just sound like the excuses of a guilty man trying to shift blame. Update 1. Catherine moved out 3 days later, but not before having a long private conversation with Emma and Sophie. I wasn't present for that conversation, but the results were immediate. Both girls became cold and distant toward me. When I tried to talk to them about the divorce, they refused to listen. Emma said her mother had already told them everything they needed to know, and that she was disgusted with me. I asked what Catherine had told them. Emma said that I had been having an affair with a woman from work for over a year, that I had been planning to leave the family, and that when Catherine confronted me about it, I had turned everything around and blamed her instead. Sophie started crying and said she couldn't believe I would do this to their mother, that I had destroyed their family. I tried to explain that Catherine was lying, that she was the one who had the affair with Jason. But the moment I said Jason's name, both girls shut down completely. Emma said I was disgusting for trying to frame Jason, who had been nothing but kind to our family. Sophie said she didn't want to hear my excuses and that she couldn't look at me. Catherine had played it perfectly. By telling them first and positioning me as the cheater trying to shift blame, she had inoculated them against the truth. Anything I said now would sound like the desperate lies of a guilty man. And by naming Jason specifically as my supposed target for false accusations, she had made it impossible for me to expose the real affair without seeming vindictive. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Catherine's lawyer painted me as an unfaithful husband who was trying to avoid his financial responsibilities. They had no evidence of my supposed affair because it didn't exist, but they didn't need evidence. They just needed to create enough doubt and make enough accusations to muddy the waters. Catherine fought for primary custody of Emma and Sophie, claiming I was an unfit father who had abandoned his family. My lawyer argued that the girls were old enough to spend equal time with both parents, but Catherine's lawyer claimed the girls were traumatized by my affair and needed the stability of living primarily with their mother. The judge granted Catherine primary custody, with me getting alternate weekends and one evening per week. I was also ordered to pay substantial child support and spousal support. Catherine's part-time real estate income was deemed insufficient to support her lifestyle, so I was responsible for maintaining her standard of living despite her being the one who had destroyed our marriage. I tried to maintain a relationship with Emma and Sophie during my custody time, but they made it clear they didn't want to be there. They were sullen and uncommunicative during visits. Emma was preparing for college applications and said she was too busy with schoolwork to waste time at my apartment. Sophie would spend the entire visit texting or locked in the guest room. I wrote them letters trying to explain my side of things. I sent emails and texts. I tried to have honest conversations about what had really happened. But they had completely bought into Catherine's narrative. Every attempt I made to tell the truth was seen as me attacking their mother and refusing to take responsibility for my actions. About 8 months after the divorce was finalized, Emma left for college. She went to a university 4 hours away and made it clear she didn't want me attending parents' weekend or any campus events. She said having me there would be too painful and would ruin her college experience. I sent her money for textbooks and expenses, but she barely acknowledged the gifts. Sophie became even more withdrawn after Emma left. Our custody visits became torture sessions where she would sit in silence, radiating hostility. She started making excuses to skip her weeknight visits, claiming she had too much homework or activities with friends. Catherine never enforced the custody arrangement, and my lawyer said forcing the issue would only make Sophie resent me more. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Catherine and Jason had made their relationship public within a few months of the divorce. They moved in together about a year after the divorce was finalized. Our old friend group mostly sided with Catherine, accepting her version of events. Jason apparently told people that he felt terrible about the situation but that he and Catherine had fallen in love and couldn't deny their feelings. The isolation was crushing. I had lost my wife, my best friend, my daughters, and most of my social circle in one devastating sweep. My identity as a father had been stolen from me by Catherine's lies. I threw myself into work, taking on extra clients and projects to fill the emptiness and to pay the substantial support payments. The holidays were particularly brutal. That first Thanksgiving after the divorce, I sat alone in my apartment with takeout while knowing Emma and Sophie were celebrating with Catherine and Jason. Christmas was even worse, watching happy families in stores and on social media while my daughters refused to acknowledge my existence. I sent them gifts that were returned unopened, cards that went unanswered. My mother called me frequently during that first year, heartbroken that her granddaughters wouldn't speak to her either. Catherine had apparently told the girls that my entire family was toxic and that maintaining relationships with them meant choosing my side over hers. My parents had lost their granddaughters to Catherine's manipulation just as surely as I had lost my daughters. I attended therapy during this time, trying to process the grief and anger. My therapist helped me understand that I was mourning not just the loss of my marriage, but the loss of my identity as a father. The girls were alive and well, but they were dead to me in every practical sense. It was a unique kind of torture, knowing my children existed but wanted nothing to do with me. I did eventually start dating again, about 2 years after the divorce. I met a woman named Andrea through a work conference. She was divorced with no children and worked in corporate law. I was honest with her from the beginning about my situation with Emma and Sophie. Andrea was understanding and supportive, but she also pointed out that I had been too passive in fighting Catherine's false narrative. Andrea convinced me to try one more time to reach out to Emma and Sophie with the full truth. She helped me write a detailed letter explaining exactly what had happened, finding Catherine and Jason together, Catherine's threats to lie to the girls, the timeline of the affair, and how Melissa had been complicit in the deception. I sent the letter to both girls, along with a request that they at least hear me out before completely writing me off. Neither Emma nor Sophie responded to the letter. I later learned from my brother, who had maintained some contact with Emma through social media, that the girls had shown the letter to Catherine. Catherine had apparently told them that the letter proved how delusional and desperate I was, that I was still making up lies to avoid taking responsibility. She said my accusations about Melissa being involved in some elaborate conspiracy showed how far I had fallen. Update 2. 3 years passed with virtually no contact with my daughters. Emma graduated college and got engaged to her boyfriend of 2 years. I learned about the engagement through social media before receiving a brief email from Emma informing me that she was getting married and that while I was invited to the wedding, she did not want me walking her down the aisle or giving a speech. She made it clear my attendance was more about avoiding family drama than wanting me there. Sophie finished high school and started at a local university, living at home with Catherine to save money. According to my brother's occasional updates, Sophie was studying psychology and doing well academically. She had completely blocked me on all social media and had changed her phone number without giving me the new one. The child support payments finally ended when Sophie turned 18, though I continued paying spousal support to Catherine. The financial burden had been significant but manageable. What hurt more was the money I had set aside for Emma's wedding, knowing she didn't want my involvement in the planning or celebration. Then everything changed 6 months ago. I received a phone call from Emma's fiancé, Tyler. He introduced himself awkwardly and said he needed to talk to me about something important. We agreed to meet for coffee the next day. Tyler was a decent young man, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation he was about to have. He explained that he had always felt something was off about the story of my supposed affair and abandonment. Emma's bitterness toward me seemed disproportionate to what she had described, and Catherine's behavior at family events made him uneasy. He said Catherine was overly controlling and manipulative, and that she had tried to drive a wedge between him and Emma several times. Then Tyler told me something that changed everything. About 2 weeks earlier, Emma had left her laptop open while she went to take a shower. Tyler hadn't meant to snoop, but he saw an email notification pop up from Catherine. The preview showed part of a message where Catherine was discussing coordinating stories about me with someone. Tyler's curiosity got the better of him and he opened Emma's email. What he found was years of correspondence between Catherine and Melissa, discussing their ongoing coordination to maintain the false narrative about my supposed affair. The emails included messages from around the time of the divorce, where Catherine and Melissa strategized about how to convince Emma and Sophie that I was the cheater. There were messages about coaching the girls on what to say if I ever tried to tell them the truth. But most damning were recent emails from the past year. Catherine had been complaining to Melissa that she was worried Emma was starting to question the story because I had been so consistent in maintaining my innocence. Melissa advised Catherine to reinforce the narrative by occasionally bringing up my supposed betrayal and adding new fabricated details to make the story more concrete in Emma's mind. Tyler had screenshot the emails and shown them to Emma. Her initial reaction was denial and anger at Tyler for invading her privacy. But Tyler insisted she actually read the messages carefully. As Emma read through years of coordination between her mother and Melissa, she started to realize that everything she had believed about the divorce was a lie. Emma told me later that reading those emails felt like her entire reality was shattering. She had built her adult identity partly on the narrative of being the daughter of an unfaithful father who abandoned his family. She had used that story to explain her trust issues in relationships, her complicated feelings about men, and her fierce loyalty to her mother. Discovering it was all fabricated meant re-examining everything she thought she knew about herself and her family. The emails were detailed and damning. One message from right after the divorce showed Catherine writing to Melissa about how guilty she felt for lying to the girls, but that she had no choice because I would try to poison them against her if she told the truth. Another message from a year later showed Catherine joking about how easy it had been to turn the girls against me, and how they believed anything she told them. There were messages where Catherine and Melissa discussed specific lies to tell if Emma or Sophie started asking questions. They had backup stories prepared, false details about my supposed other woman, even fabricated timeline points to make their narrative seem more real. The level of premeditation was staggering. Tyler said Emma had been devastated. She spent 3 days barely speaking, processing the fact that her mother had lied to her for 5 years, poisoned her relationship with me, and stolen years that she could never get back. She was also furious at herself for never questioning the story more deeply, for accepting Catherine's version without ever really listening to me. Tyler asked me to tell him my version of events. I walked him through everything, finding Catherine and Jason together, Catherine's threat to lie to the girls, how she had gotten to them first with false accusations. Tyler nodded, saying it all matched what the emails revealed and made sense of things that had never quite added up in Catherine's story. He told me that Emma wanted to see me but was too ashamed and scared to reach out directly. She felt like she had spent 5 years being cruel to an innocent man, and she didn't know how to face me. Tyler asked if I would be willing to meet with Emma and give her a chance to apologize and try to rebuild our relationship. I agreed immediately, though I was terrified of hoping too much. We arranged to meet at a quiet restaurant the following week. Those days of waiting were agonizing. I had dreamed of this moment for 5 years, but I had never imagined it would come with Emma having to face such a devastating betrayal by her own mother. The meeting was emotional and difficult. Emma looked older than her 22 years, with dark circles under her eyes from crying and lack of sleep. She hugged me before we even sat down, crying into my shoulder and apologizing over and over. I held her and told her it wasn't her fault, that she had been manipulated by someone she trusted. We talked for 3 hours. Emma asked me detailed questions about the affair, about what I had tried to do to maintain our relationship, about the letters I had sent that she had returned unopened. She cried when I told her about how isolated I had felt, about the holidays I had spent alone, about the graduation and birthdays I had missed. Emma showed me printouts of some of the emails between Catherine and Melissa. Reading them was like watching a master class in manipulation and parental alienation. Catherine had been strategic and deliberate in every lie, every story, every detail she planted in the girls' minds. Melissa had served as Catherine's accomplice and cheerleader, reinforcing the false narrative whenever Catherine worried the girls might start questioning things. I asked Emma about Sophie. Emma said she had tried to tell Sophie about the emails, but Sophie had refused to look at them. Sophie was still completely under Catherine's influence and had accused Emma of betraying their mother by meeting with me. The two sisters were now barely speaking, with Sophie claiming Emma was being manipulated by me and Tyler. Emma decided she needed to confront Catherine directly. She wanted to hear her mother try to explain the emails and see if Catherine would finally admit the truth. I advised against it, saying that confrontation would likely just result in more manipulation and lies. But Emma felt she needed closure and to give Catherine one chance to be honest. Update 3. The confrontation between Emma and Catherine happened at Catherine's house with Jason present. Emma told me about it later, still shaking from the experience. She had gone over with printouts of the emails and had laid them out on Catherine's kitchen table. Catherine's first response was to claim the emails were fake, that I must have somehow created them to turn Emma against her. When Emma pointed out they were from Catherine's own email account with years of metadata, Catherine switched tactics. She started crying and said she had only told those lies to protect Emma and Sophie from the painful truth about my affair. Emma pushed back, pointing out that the emails proved there had never been any affair on my part. Catherine then claimed that maybe she had exaggerated some details, but that the core truth was that I had been emotionally abusive and she had done what she thought was necessary to protect her daughters. The goalpost kept moving as Emma countered each lie. Jason had stayed quiet through most of the confrontation, but Emma eventually turned on him too. She asked him directly if he felt any remorse for participating in the destruction of her relationship with me. Jason said he had fallen in love with Catherine and that sometimes love meant making difficult choices. Emma told him he was a coward and that he had helped steal 5 years of her relationship with her father. The confrontation ended with Catherine screaming at Emma that she was being ungrateful and that after everything Catherine had sacrificed as a mother, this betrayal was unforgivable. Catherine told Emma that if she chose to believe my lies over her own mother's truth, then she was no longer welcome in Catherine's home. Emma left, and Catherine sent her a text an hour later saying she was devastated by Emma's betrayal and needed space to heal. The manipulation was stunning even in defeat. Catherine had somehow positioned herself as the victim of Emma's discovery of the truth. She had taken no responsibility and showed no remorse. Instead, she had turned Emma's justified anger into an attack on Catherine's sacrifices and maternal love. Sophie's reaction was even worse. When Emma tried to show her the emails and explain what she had learned, Sophie refused to even look at them. She said Emma had always been jealous of the close relationship Sophie had with Catherine, and that this was Emma's way of trying to destroy their family. Sophie told Emma that choosing me over Catherine proved Emma had never really loved their mother. The division between the sisters was heartbreaking for Emma. She had hoped that once Sophie saw the evidence, they could process their anger together and rebuild their relationships with me as a united front. Instead, Sophie had doubled down on believing Catherine's lies, and the two sisters were now estranged. Emma asked if I wanted her to do something public to clear my name, maybe post about what had really happened on social media or send emails to the friend group explaining the truth. I told her that while I appreciated the thought, I didn't need public vindication. What mattered was that she knew the truth and that we were rebuilding our relationship. Emma decided she wanted to do something meaningful to make up for lost time. She asked if I would walk her down the aisle at her wedding after all. The wedding was 3 months away, and Emma wanted to rewrite that story. She also uninvited Catherine, saying she couldn't have someone at her wedding who had spent 5 years poisoning her relationship with me. The wedding was beautiful and bittersweet. Walking Emma down the aisle was a moment I had thought I would never have. I kept my speech short and focused on Emma and Tyler, not on the lost years or the lies that had separated us. Several of our old friends attended who had sided with Catherine in the divorce, and some of them approached me to apologize for believing Catherine's story without ever asking for my side. Sophie did not attend the wedding. She had sent Emma a message saying that attending would be a betrayal of Catherine, and that she couldn't support Emma's decision to believe my manipulation over their mother's truth. Emma was heartbroken by her sister's absence, but she tried to focus on the positive parts of the day. After the wedding, Emma started making plans to expose the truth more widely. She sent copies of the emails between Catherine and Melissa to key members of our old social circle, along with a detailed explanation of what had really happened. She also sent the information to Jason's employer, since Jason worked in an industry where reputation and character mattered. The fallout was swift. Several friends reached out to apologize to me and to express their anger at having been deceived by Catherine and Melissa for years. Jason's professional reputation took a hit when word spread about his role in the affair and subsequent lies. Melissa was essentially excommunicated from the neighborhood social groups once her complicity became known. Catherine tried to control the narrative by claiming the emails had been taken out of context and that Emma was having some kind of breakdown or was being manipulated by me and Tyler. But too many people had now seen the evidence, and Catherine's credibility was destroyed. She eventually deleted all her social media accounts to escape the criticism and questions. I heard through Emma that Catherine and Jason's relationship was deteriorating under the pressure. Jason apparently resented Catherine for exposing him to professional and social consequences, while Catherine blamed Jason for not being supportive enough during her public shaming. There was a certain poetry to watching their relationship crumble under the weight of the lies they had built it on. Sophie still refuses to believe the truth. She lives with Catherine and has cut off contact with Emma completely. Emma sends her sister occasional messages saying she loves her and hopes Sophie will eventually be willing to look at the evidence, but Sophie never responds. Emma has accepted that rebuilding her relationship with Sophie may take years, if it ever happens at all. Emma and I now have lunch together every Sunday. We're slowly rebuilding what was stolen from us, though we both acknowledge that those 5 years can never be recovered. We have an honest relationship now where Emma asks me questions about things she missed, and I share stories from the years when she wouldn't speak to me. I'm watching my daughter build her marriage with Tyler, and I'm grateful to be part of her life again. Andrea has been incredibly supportive through this entire process, and Emma has welcomed her into our family dinners. We're creating something new, built on truth instead of lies. Catherine's lies stole 5 years of my relationship with my daughters. They cost me countless holidays, birthdays, and milestones. They isolated me from my community and made me doubt my worth as a father. But they didn't win in the end. The truth eventually came out, and Emma chose to believe evidence over comfortable lies. To any parent going through parental alienation, I offer this hope: the truth has a way of surfacing eventually. It may take years, and you may lose time you can never get back. But if you stay consistent in your truth and keep the door open for your children, there's a chance they will eventually see through the lies. Don't give up, even when it seems hopeless. Your children may come back to you when they're ready to see clearly.